time, we had a very small group due to a lot of illnesses, and it was supposed to be the first time new board members met with returning board members, but they didn't get to introduce themselves to too many people. So I think we're going to go around the room real quickly and have everyone introduce themselves. Brian, I'm sorry, this is going to be your third time. And give us your name and who you represent and why you were interested in being on this board. You want to start and get it over with?
Yeah, no, happy to. Do I need to talk into this? I can't remember. Okay.
If you press the button.
If it's
on, if it's red, it's on.
great. So my name is Brian Strutz. I am here in the capacity of small business, specifically restaurants. A part of 3 restaurants in our group. One of them is a pizzeria downtown called Adopo, and the other 2 are Pachki Deli and then a new bagel restaurant that opened up in West Knoxville. So we are a commercial client of KUB's as well as residential. And I was honored to be asked to be a part of this, mostly out of the curiosity to learn more about what KUB is and how it functions. So just happy to be here, mostly.
So my name is Laura Johns. I'm the site manufacturing director at Dow Chemical that's located here, kind of buried under the interstates in Knoxville. It's formerly Romanhouse for those people that have lived in the area a long time. I also have accountability for 9 other sites across North America and Latin America. So in charge of EH&S, people, budget, all of those things. We're obviously a very large commercial customer for KUB and just very interested in getting more engaged from a community perspective.
Tinky Dixon, pastor, been in the community for a while and also on this board for a while. We've seen people come and go, so still hanging around, but definitely involved in the community and community issues and represent the local churches, a local conference of churches, and still hanging around. And KUB continues to intrigue me. So it's a good thing. Intrigue is a good thing. Thank you.
Amen. My name is Kira Wyatt. I'm with Connect Ministries, and I'm glad to be here today. I think it is a privilege and an honor to serve on this board. We do have a lot of clients that come in that have had their utilities cut off or threatening to be cut off. So any kind of way that I can learn to help evade that process, I'm willing to listen, but also willing to put the input in from the community about how it is affecting their lives and their quality of life. So it's just good to be here with people who have energy in mind and that can help solve the problems in our community. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Testerman. I'm the CEO of Young Williams Animal Center. I'm also a former city council member. And just, was involved when KUB was rolling out fiber. I feel like I hopefully was a big advocate for that and really felt like it was important. And now, both as a customer, residential and commercial, but also knowing the needs across our city, want to stay engaged, want to continue to be ambassador for the good work that this organization is doing.
Maybe I should have some instructions.
Your organization and why you want to be a part of the board. We're introducing the new members.
Okay. Cheryl Ball with the City of Knoxville. I'm the Chief Policy Officer, and some of you have heard this before, but my former boss, Erin Gill, asked me when she came over to KUB to fulfill a role and represent the city on this group, and it is very clearly important to me. The sustainability department at the City of Knoxville reports up through me, as does a myriad of other things that are very relevant to this work, and so it's a very natural connection for me and important to stay connected.
Great. My name is Stephen Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. We are a regional nonprofit energy and environmental advocacy organization that does work primarily in 5 southeastern states. Tennessee is one of the 5, the Carolinas, North, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Have a long history of tracking the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is the power provider for KUB and obviously the 153 local power companies that engage with TVA. And a resident in Knoxville, so a residential customer as well as our organization is a commercial customer a small commercial customer for TVA. And my interests are primarily in the environmental footprint of how we produce and consume energy, and particularly the implications for climate change, climate disruption that we're witnessing, and also for making sure that smart, environmentally friendly, economically progressive policies are undertaken by the utilities. We do a lot of regulatory intervention with the investor-owned utilities in other states, and because TVA is a unicorn that isn't like anything else, there are different ways to interact with TVA, and working with the local power companies is one of them. So glad to be here.
All right, I'm John Nolt. I'm a retired professor from UT, taught environmental ethics primarily, but other philosophical topics. I'm with the Sierra Club, representing the Sierra Club here. I work on toxic waste issues, on wild areas, preservation of wild areas, and sustainable living and sustainable energy. So I have a natural interest in all this. We generate a lot of our power at home by solar energy. So, and we sell to KUB.
We're introducing the new members to the former board members. So do you mind introducing yourself, your name, organization, and why you wanted to be on the board?
Sure. I am Misty Goodwin with the Knox County Community Action Committee, otherwise known as CAC. I inherited this role from my executive director, who is transitioning out, but we serve a lot of the lower income community with energy assistance and utility assistance, and so that's my particular interest in the meeting.
Thank you. I promise you, too, you don't have to do this again. Before we move on, I want to recognize Commissioner Kathy Hamilton and thank her for coming today. She's very loyal to this group. You've received the February minutes sent to you for review. Are there any corrections? If not, we will say that they are approved. We're going to talk today about grid modernization, which is very critical to the utility industry. And KUB is considering initiating some projects in relation to their electric system modernization in the new fiscal year, which begins July 1. And that's why we shifted the meeting, because they felt your input would be valuable in advance of any of the changes that they may make. So Aaron Gill, who you know, KUB Vice President of Sustainability and Government Relations, and John Gresham, who is the KUB Senior Vice President and Chief Engineering and Operations Officer, that is a mouthful, John, are going to give an overview of the strategy and then lead in a discussion with you all and get your input on potential customer programs. Aaron?
So maybe we'll start introductions. To introduce yourself to this group, and John's got a long, okay. So I'm really glad that I'm here with John, because John has been kind of a wise mentor to me as I've come on board the utility industry and really tried to understand where we are at, both from the infrastructure investments we've made as well as those from the table. So we have been co-leading, along with several others at the organization, some internal dialogue related to this grid modernization concept, and wanted to, as Don said, to bring this group some previews of the types of things we're thinking about and get some hopefully very timely and relevant feedback from this group that will help inform how we can move forward with several of these initiatives. So we intended this to be a bit of a dialogue. You'll see us kind of bounce between who's talking, but we also would love for you to ask questions along the way, and then we do hope that we'll have some time for that kind of reflection and advice that you might give to us as we think about these programs. So the other thing I'll caveat is, you know, and Stephen, you brought this up, you know, this is all intricately connected with TVA as our power provider. However, we're really trying to focus today on what we do at the distribution scale. So we're not as much gonna, you know, spend time peeling back the layers of the onion on the TVA side. So with those caveats, the introduction, we'll kind of go ahead and get into it. But the reason why we have been talking a lot about this topic at KUB is because we are in, as so many industries are, a period of rapid evolution and change. So the electric industry is facing a whole bunch of changes. Some of those changes are happening to us, some are happening with us, but no matter what, we've got to be able to evolve with that landscape. So we know that decarbonization is increasingly an interest not only of our customers, but of our regulators. So we have had to adjust and understand what's happening in that space. We have embraced at KUB, but also see increasing interest in further evolution around the idea of digitalization. So more and more connectivity between devices, automation, all of these things of taking these legacy processes and turning them into these automated, sometimes autonomous, sometimes, but increasingly digital management. We're dealing with that. That comes with cybersecurity risks and the need to protect the integrity of those systems that we're managing. And so we're thinking about that on a daily basis. That is a big deal for utilities. We are oftentimes targets, and so our IT team is on top of that, but that complexity only increases as we bring on new technologies. Weather and extreme weather, both in terms of storms as well as extreme temperatures, is increasingly a challenge, and we've seen how that can impact the electricity grid, not just in terms of storm outages because a tree fell or there was high winds, but as you saw in Winter Storm Elliott, we had the first time we had rolling blackouts, and that was because the grid could not provide enough power to keep up with the spike in electricity demand caused by extremely cold temperatures. So that is a increasing stress we feel. We're cognizant of that day in and day out. It's part of who we are at KUB to worry about storms, but we're seeing some new challenges emerge because of those extreme events. And then we also, of course, our commitment to the customer, want to make sure that we stay responsive to the needs, the evolving demands of our customer base, and those look different. No customer is like another customer. We have a very unique, well, I shouldn't say unique, but ubiquitous, change of just people having different needs. And that's industrial, residential, commercial, small commercial, big commercial. All of those customers have different needs, different expectations. And so we want to make sure that those are at the forefront of what we're thinking about. So change is among us. It's around us. It's happening to us, with us, all around. And what we're talking today is how we remain agile to that. You've seen some of these headlines. I won't dwell too long here, but when I talk about those trends on the former slide, that's not just the global. This is really local, and you've seen this happen across the industry, where we're seeing these things that maybe felt like they were on the horizon really now be here and present. The extreme weather, the extreme temperatures setting up demand. We've seen, the need for more generation by TVA to keep up with that demand, rising demand, rolling blackouts. But we've also seen these kind of, some peppered in here, an evolution in the relationships and the role of customers in helping utilities balance that need. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But again, emphasizing here, this is an active conversation around the utility industry. It's a very hot topic, and it's one that we're having here as well. So again, all of that change demands agility and an increasing level of ability to be flexible and to respond. We are responsible for meeting our customers' needs anytime, all the time, even amidst those extreme challenges. And so in order to meet that mission, we have and will continue to rely on technology. Technology is a really important tool for helping us maintain those services, keep them safe, reliable, and affordable. But we also expect that the relationship with our customers is evolving, and that through customer programs and different interactions with our customer base, that we can be more flexible and respond to that change a little bit more effectively. This is the distribution system of the past, very linear. TVA generated the power, they sold it to us, we sold it to you. The future is a lot more complicated. There's a lot more of a two-way street, a lot more communication. This idea that it's not just taking a product and moving it through, it's really about this ongoing network of interactions that are happening in real time throughout the entire day. And so that's part of why we want to make sure we're being very proactive and thinking about how we interact with our customers in this. So as we navigate this world, and this has been true for decades, it's not a new evolution, but KUB is very cognizant of how we balance our values. How do we think about the trade-offs, for example, between reliability or affordability? So we are trying to keep all of these values, all of these paradigms in balance, making the right decisions for our customers, and recognizing that while you can usually advance more than one at a time, you sometimes can't always advance everything you want to do all at once. But we are excited that we have the opportunity to kind of reflect on these with you today and think about how these values balance in the scheme of the decisions that we're making. We want to talk about some trade-offs that we've balanced in the couple years, and just some of these real-time and kind of iconic examples that you might help resonate with kind of that balance point.
Yeah, and Aaron, I would think also prioritizing what's most important in real time. So Aaron mentioned the winter storm there a couple of years ago, and the rotating outages that we experienced. That's a priority for us today. We don't want the community to go through that. Back then, we didn't have a lot of tools. Some of the things we're going to be talking about today are tools to give us operational flexibility to ride through those extreme peaks. So what you'll hear Aaron and I talking about today is managing some system peaks. And we've got a video we'll show you that talks about that. So peaks can be driven by extreme weather, namely temperatures, really, really cold. So Winter Storm Elliott, it got cold very rapidly across the entire valley, which is part of the drivers for that. It could also get very warm very quickly and put pressure on the grid. So we've got those peaks. We've also got monthly peaks driven by customer behaviors. We all get up in the morning, we all, get ready for work, we all do those things. We come home after work and we turn on the air conditioner and we do laundry and we cook, and those are peaks that happen every single day, and there's a monetary impact to that. So we're going to talk about that as our top priority, I think, today's some of the initial programs we're talking about. But we do have those puts and takes. Like Aaron said, we could make our system really, really reliable, but that could be very, very expensive. So, we always get the question about why don't you underground all the power lines? And that would be spectacular, but it's 5 to 10 times the cost of building what we build today. It would conflict with other utilities that are already in the ground, and it would really drive cost for our consumers. So we strategically underground where it's smart and makes sense, and we build other things overhead. So that's a trade-off. We talk about sustainability and the adoption of EVs and solar, and that's all good, but it adds complication to the grid. So it enhances resiliency, but could compromise safety. So we have to be very careful, because now you have multiple sources of energy coming on the grid, and when bad things happen, that's not good. So we have to make sure we're protecting that. So I think we have puts and takes. And as our blueprint over there on the wall kind of indicates, KUB focuses all things on balance. We think that's a really good way to approach things. So
we kind of offered to pause here and see if y'all had reflections on this. We don't want to get too bogged down in kind of this existential conversation before we move to the more pragmatic side, but we were kind of interested if you feel like this resonates, and just kind of if you're getting what we're putting down when we think about these changes that are happening and how we need to kind of balance and how we evolve.
I think if I was going to put something up for, manufacturing and industry in general, what I look at, these are all very similar spheres, right, of what you have to balance in terms of reliability and productivity for your customers while keeping safety at the forefront, trying to do what's right from a sustainability perspective, but a lot of times that's more expensive or the resources aren't available, right? So still trying to focus on the right business case, and of course you want the quality that you're putting out there for your customer. So I think, it resonates with me in terms of from an industry perspective.
Thanks.
I have maybe a little more specific question, maybe it's for later in the presentation, but you mentioned the winter storm back in Christmas Eve when TVA had the first roll of blackouts in their history, and customers were shut down. This past winter, I think it was late January, another peak, TVA had at least two, maybe three of their nuclear units were down. And there was I was not aware of this because I guess you guys rode through it, but it was brought to my attention that Hamilton County Schools in Chattanooga actually shut down because of curtailment, which I guess was with the EPB. Were y'all given a curtailment direction by TVA at that time, or do you understand what happened in that situation and how were they affected? Was that something unique to their position on the grid, or is that something that you guys were in a better position than they were and were able to ride through it, or was it just that the school system decided they were going to step off?
Yeah, that's the case. We did get signals from TVA early. They do a really good job of their forecasting for us, and we started having, meetings, starts once a day and then twice a day as the event gets closer. So they've got a program that's called the Emergency Load Curtailment Program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They have step 10 through 50. And they started executing those steps. They started with 10, then they went to 20, which was kind of internal baseball for the utilities to start cutting load as best we can. Then it goes to 30, where you have the voluntary plea to the public. And that's, from what I heard with the schools down there, they chose to voluntarily make that decision. TVA didn't ask them to do it. I don't know if EPB did or not. I don't think I've heard that. They made a voluntary decision to do that. But we take that program very seriously. We practice it quite regularly. And it's that first signals into, okay, the system's, under duress and feeling pressure from the loading.
Yeah.
John, I spoke to my counterpart at EPB, Stephen. It was purely a decision of the school
board.
EPB did not reach out to them.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was not and I was talking to somebody in leadership with the Distributor Association or the LPC Association, and they signaled to me that there's a general feeling, and I don't know if y'all share it, that based on some of the instability that's going on with TVA and some of the things that have happened, that curtailments may actually be more the norm going forward than it has been historically. Are y'all taking that perspective?
Well, I think that is part of why we have begun this conversation with you all today, because what we're going to talk about are the levers that we have as a utility so that we can pull those levers in a step 50 situation. Step 50 was when we started the rolling blackouts. And we never want to do that again. So these are some of the levers that we really see as being in our toolbox to support that, resiliency benefit in that emergency situation. We also see a win-win, though, on a more regular basis. So our hope is that we, as the distributor, can do some things such that the impact on the customer in a moment like that is much less discernible.
No, I appreciate that. But my question is, are you as a LPC customer of TVA forecasting that that's going to be more the norm given some of the generation challenges that they're having?
I think, and we're on many teams with TVA now working through this, right? The regional grid transformation things they have going on, their integrated resource planning that's going on, their integrated transmission planning that just started. So we're engaged with them, and all of us are looking towards the future. So I would say, in that particular case, Stephen, that TVA's gotten sensitive to this because of the outcome from Winter Storm Elliott. We recognize we're working on fairly thin margins, and so they're communicating more often, which is causing us to go, okay, they're communicating more often, so we need to ready ourselves for this. And we know they winterized a bunch of their plants, which was a good thing, because that peak we had not too long ago could have gone another way if they hadn't have done that work. So they're trying to address that. They're trying to figure out how they build additional generation for the future. But we're trying to ready ourselves in any contingency here. So are we feeling that pressure? Maybe a little bit. It would not be wise not to take action just in case.
Right.
Are we confident they're gonna do the things they need to do? Well, they've been a pretty good partner for ours. So yeah, we're partnering with them to figure that out. But we've got to ready ourselves for our community.
Yeah, and I think these are what we're trying to talk about, like those no regrets types of programs where there's a lot of win-wins, and no matter what happens, we see a lot of opportunities to just do things that make sense.
Yeah,
So.
and what you'll see here, that ELCP we talk about when they start entering into that phase, is they talk a lot about load in 5% increments. So Winter Storm Elliott came, You know, they had a few units down, they recognized they were in trouble, they made that call, and they asked for us to cut 5% of our load, all LPCs across the valley, to cut 5%. The next morning came, which was that next peak, they went to 10%. And according to that program, they can go all the way up to 20-ish percentage to do that. We think at 10, we were gonna run into trouble. Very, very hard to do. We were gonna have to figure out something. Luckily, we didn't get there, but now we've spun out, and what you're gonna hear in here is finding 5% increments of operational flexibility that we can deal with to at least avoid that. So when I say we're trying to prioritize, that priority's kind of, to your question,
Right.
is let's make sure we're shored up and ready to deal with that.
Can I ask a question, just from a layman's personal point of view? When you're looking about this grid, you're talking about going up to 10, and perhaps you could have been at 20%. The consideration for actually implementing solar units in homes and businesses, is that something that you guys are looking to do in the future? Because back in the 80s, when you guys implemented the HVAC units to get rid of the old stuff, is that a consideration, and would that have a positive effect on the outcomes as far as managing energy levels?
You are keying up exactly where we're going.
We're heading there.
So yeah, hold on to that thought, because I think this is all really, at the crux of why we feel like this is an imperative. What we're going to talk about is not just a nice to have, feel good kind of option. What we're really thinking about are programs that absolutely have that very pragmatic benefit to us. So we're going to keep moving here. If you'll go with us, John's going to talk about technology.
So yeah, as Aaron said a little earlier there, this is very technological at the end of the day. The grid's becoming more complex, it's becoming more real time, and we're going to deal with that with technology. So we have invested in technology for decades, mostly for operational needs. Most of the things we're going to talk about today are going to be operationally oriented. But this is kind of our journey and where we're heading. And we mentioned it here because this stuff's hard. I'm not a technological IT person, but these systems are very complex. They're very important to us, but they work well. So we started with what we call our SCADA system way back in the early 90s. And then there's an acronym for that, that's Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. But it's really our ability to remotely monitor and control our assets from the control center on this site. So we can reach out and we can open a breaker, we can close a breaker, we can take activities we're looking at our system. And that served us well, and it ran over copper and radio way back in the day. It's functioning over fiber now as we build that backbone, and it goes really good. So in the early 90s, we jumped from there to that GIS, that's our Geographical Information System. And it holds all of our assets in a virtual world and all of the characteristics about those assets. So we know where a transformer's at geographically, we know what size it is, we know how old it is, we know the manufacturer, we know lots of stuff about our system. In addition to having that inventory of assets, it also maintains the connectivity, right? So an electric system's a grid, and things are connected to things. That system holds that connectivity, and that's important because that system feeds the next one, which is what we call our outage management system. And we got this going in the mid-90s, late 90s. We really jumped to new technologies, and so the first iteration of this depended on our customers to call into our call center and say, our power's out. And that system would take that, put it into the system, and try to calculate where the outages were. It would predict, estimate. As we moved to smart meters in the 2000s, those smart meters did a great job. They gave us the ability to turn service on and off remotely without having to roll a truck. Saved a lot of money. It helps us calculate our bills more accurately. So that's a good thing, but also the meters are smart and they know when the power's out. And when the power goes out to a meter, it contacts our outage management system and tells it. So we get those outages. So there's no need anymore for a customer to call us and tell us your power's out. We know almost instantaneously. So that perfected and improved our ability to predict where outages were on our system. And if you think about this in your neighborhood, your outage typically isn't at your home or your business. Your outage is something that's happened down the line, right? So 3 or 4 blocks down the road, a tree will fall, which is, half of our outages are vegetation related, or a vehicle will hit a pole. And so finding that spot to get our resources to as quickly as possible to get those repairs made is a big deal for us. So smart meters really made that go fast. Now you move into fiber, which we're building out our high-speed communication system with fiber. So our fiber folks, none of them are here, they love to sell you fiber, they love to market fiber, and you all like to buy it. For my side of the house, though, I get a very high-speed, real-time communication system that I can leverage to get tactical information back from our system. And some of the things we're going to talk about today are enabled by that investment that KUB's making. So the fiber is a good thing, and a good example of that I'll talk about in a minute is what we're building out a self-healing grid. So we talked about our balances. Reliability is one of those balances. It's very important to our customers. We hear that regularly. That self-healing grid works with no human intervention and is going to really improve reliability. So leveraging that fiber to make community reliability better is a good thing, and that's underway. I'll talk about it in a minute. And then moving forward are the new technologies that are coming, and they're advanced distribution management systems, which allow us to manage all of those devices that are working automatically. We're going to have a DERM system, which will allow us to incorporate the solar, because putting solar out there is great, but it's a generation source. We need to know where it's at. We need to have connectivity to it, and it's feeding the grid. So that technology will come into play at some point in our future. So very dependent on technology. It's very good for us, and the fiber, you know, for today, this fiber investment in the community is really enabling everything else we're about to talk about, if that makes sense. Questions on technology at all? Okay. So let's go through an example of this to give you a flavor of it. So what we're calling our self-healing grid, you see a picture there, that's the smart switch as it's installed out on our system. It's great technology. It's self-contained. It connects to that fiber system. It communicates through that fiber system. And these devices are smart. We team them. They talk to each other all around the community. We've got a great PowerPoint slide. I wish we'd incorporated here. But what it does is this system doesn't prevent the outages that we experience. What it does is it shrinks the impact of that. So a tree falls through a line, these switches talk to each other, and they reconfigure our system in a matter of seconds to reduce the outage to the smallest number of customers possible. And we think that's a good thing. So we plan to put about 1,200 of those things in on our system in the next few years. We've got about 231 of them out there active now. We're doing 144 this year. We'll do 144 next year, and then we're going to speed up a little bit. We're following directly behind the fiber build out. So they build out, they start hooking up customers, and a few months after that, we're right behind them putting these devices in, engineering the design of that. So we've got about 63,000 of our 220,000 customers currently protected by these devices, and that's enough to see that they work and they're having a very positive impact. We're starting to see the benefits of that. So a storm will roll through here, and we might have been used to seeing 15,000 customers out when that weather blew through. Well, that same weather is blowing through now, and we're seeing 3,000 customers out. Distinct different. Matter of fact, we used to gauge our response by the number of customers out, and we're having to rethink that. And we're going to gauge it by the number of outages events we've actually got because it's really good. So it's avoided customer interruptions. So you can see there, fiscal year 25 this year, we're not quite through yet. We've prevented 3.4 million minutes of interruption, and that's really good. We've been doing this for a few years. We've hit about 28 million minutes. You can see the deployment there. The green's what's currently in place, and the blue's what we're working on this fiscal year.
Just to be clear, if a neighborhood or part of the city or the service territory has fiber, is it a safe assumption that it also now has this smart switch?
Oh, there's a delay of maybe 3 to 6 months as we follow behind them. So we let them get there, we let them get their sales going, and then we're.
So everything is.
We stage about 6 months behind their start time. Yeah.
But it will be the full system.
But yeah.
No, I understand that, but I was just wondering. So the green there is.
The green's done. It's protected. Okay. The blue's mostly done now because we're about at the end of our fiscal year. So.
Got it.
So we'll head and we'll follow behind other maps. So to put that in perspective, we experience, of course, weather, is variable for us, but we experience probably 20 to 25 million minutes of customer interruption a year. So we've already saved a year's worth in the few years we've been doing this. So to put it in better perspective, one of the metrics we use to measure reliability is what's called the SAIDI, which is the System Average Interruption Duration Indice. And that's basically taking all of your minutes of outage, divided by your total number of customers, and that generates a time. And so we're just south of 2 hours per customer per year on outage. We're like 1.85. This system, once it's fully deployed, which has been done in Chattanooga at EPB, we'll drive that down to 1 hour per customer per year. So basically cutting it in half, and that's significant for our community, and really only could be done with that fiber investment, like we said. But this is part of that modernization. This grid's going to work. And so you can see this is going to change the way we behave, the way our operators behave, the way our field personnel behave. And again, technology is going to allow us to keep them safe and knowledgeable as these systems readjust on the fly without any human intervention. So it's really neat to watch. It works great. We're really happy with what we've done so far, and it's just a great example of how the grid's changing for us and how we're investing in improving reliability as it does.
So that's one really great example, and it's one that kind of very baked into how the utility is managing the grid. And that real-time interaction is kind of one quality that we think is really applicable within a lot of other types of programs. So we're going to spend the next part of this presentation walking through a couple different types of programs that sit at the intersection of what we call kind of 3 big buckets of goals. So the first is the ability to keep the system resilient, electric system resilience. And this is, whether it's the storm event or the extreme weather or the extreme temperature event like we saw Winter Storm Elliott, we want to keep the lights on for you. The other one at the bottom there is the wholesale bill savings. And this is the amount of money that we pay to TVA. And that is based on that demand, on how much we're using. So this is our opportunity to save all of us money. So if we keep that wholesale bill low, we all save money because we pass that through to customers. And then the third bucket, though, is about customer convenience and preference. And so that's what we want to kind of gut check with you all today and see if the ideas that we're thinking about are in line with what you would say as a customer. Yes, this is feeling like the kind of thing I'd be interested in. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. But before we do, we alluded to this, we got to make sure that everyone gets a sense of this peak load concept that we're talking about. I'm sure, Stephen, you're pretty aware of it and understand it well, but yeah.
Before you jump, there's 2 aspects of what y'all just talked about that I think you should also add to the benefits of the self-healing grid. Okay. First of all, you don't roll trucks, which means that if you're not sending the trucks out to deal with this as quickly because it can self-heal and this, that, and the other, there's less truck rolls and you're decreasing carbon, you're decreasing staff time.
I would say, Stephen, we drive less. The outage still, it doesn't prevent a tree from falling through the line. Right. Eventually a truck has to roll to solve the physical issue. Right. What it prevents is us driving, it helps us in not driving around looking for the. Yeah.
Because when we went down and listened to EPB explain this, they said it made a huge difference in their amount of truck rolls. And then the savings, because you're just saving time and the efficiency to do it. And I think it's an incredibly valuable thing. It should be part of y'all's bragging rights about it because it makes a hell of a lot of sense.
I think that's a good point. And I would say too, we talked about the digitalization of stuff. All of us, your refrigerator's connected to the grid now, right? I don't know why, but connected to the internet, but requires, electricity to be running. So, everybody's so much more sensitive to maybe not even outages, just blinks, right? And so I think anything we can do to shorten that, and it just has such a, you could tie it to even an economic benefit likely in the community that's pretty significant, if you added it all up. So, but I appreciate that. That's very helpful.
So I think I can do the clicker, but we're going to watch a short video. You'll hear reference. This is from a South Carolina utility, so just kind of ignore the brand.
Not us.
Yeah, not us. But the concepts that it talks about are very much relevant when you look at kind of how we do business here. So we're going to click play.
Electricity demand is defined by how much is being used at any given time. The more electricity being used at that moment, the higher the demand. Electricity demand is different from electricity consumption. Consumption is determined by how much electricity you use over time, and demand is determined by the maximum electricity you use at one time, such as over a 1-hour period. For example, if you use a 3-kilowatt oven for an hour one morning and run your 3-kilowatt clothes dryer for an hour that evening, then 3 kilowatts is your maximum demand for the day. But if one morning you turn on your 3-kilowatt oven and your 3-kilowatt dryer for the same hour, then your demand is 6 kilowatts. Energy demand ebbs and flows throughout the day. Our highest demand is usually on winter mornings and summer afternoons and evenings. When we wake up on a winter morning, we turn on the lights, adjust our heat, take hot showers, cook breakfast, etc. All of this increases demand. When we come home after work, we adjust our thermostat, cook dinner, do laundry, etc. And demand increases once again. It is our job to make sure that we always generate enough electricity to supply all our customers whenever it's needed, regardless of the demand. But an increase in demand can put a strain on the power grid. If demand grows beyond our capability to supply it, we must pay a premium price for alternative sources of electricity generation, which costs our customers money. Want to help out? It's easy. Here are a few simple things you can do to reduce demand during peak times. Use a smart thermostat to lower your heating and cooling usage when you're not home. Stagger your use of major appliances like washer, dryer, and oven. Use a timer to make sure appliances like your water heater, dishwasher, and pool pump only run when demand for electricity is lower. Use our rebates to help buy energy-efficient appliances and keep demand lower every time you use them. Get bill credits by letting us reduce your demands from major appliances during certain peak periods. Together, we can keep demand down, keep system costs down, and keep our grid strong.
So we considered cutting it off right before they got to the customer programs because that's obviously a different service territory, but we wanted to leave it in so that you all had a flavor for the types of customer programs and the actions that programs like this ask customers to take. So there's a couple key things I'll point out before we move on. So again, we're looking at an opportunity to keep that kind of grid resilience for those really extreme peaks where they were talking about having to source really expensive power to keep the lights on. At the KUB level for our wholesale power bill, it also matters every single month. So this is not just in an extreme situation. It's about how much money we pay to TVA in a given month is dependent on that total peak demand. So all of us on that winter morning, where we set that peak. And so it is a meaningful opportunity for us to reduce costs if we can bring that peak down, even in months where we're not dealing with that type of extreme temperature situation. So did that generally kind of, you're following what we're talking about? Because we'll kind of go on and we'll give you some examples of programs, but we needed to make sure everyone kind of had a general understanding of peak load concept.
Can you share what the trend line has been about KUB's peak over the last few years? What has it been steadily increasing, or is it staying in the same zone?
We haven't, Kepler has done some analysis, so Kepler's on our team. He's a clean energy fellow by DOE, but we haven't necessarily seen, a significant steady line increase. What we are seeing is increasing spikiness. So if you look at our winter, like our top 100 peaks, it used to be, you saw spikes in the summer, spikes in the winter, and those winter spikes are really high. And so that has been the driver for our total, record peak load setting. Is that fair? But peak load as a whole hasn't necessarily dramatically shifted over time.
Correct. I think we've hit multiple record peaks, and all of those were driven by those winter storms the last couple of years. But the summer and average winter day are staying pretty constant.
Yeah.
The TVA dings you for the max, right?
We are billed based on the max in every month, even in nice spring days like this.
So to that point, and I thought I heard it correctly in here, but is there a threshold of which I heard, obviously if you go over a threshold, you pay a premium. Is that the case with TVA? Is there a threshold, and if we go over that, then what we're paying increases?
So you've hit on one of the key differences. So that premium where they're talking about sourcing it from expensive other places, that's a TVA role. So yes, TVA, when they had to buy power this last winter, when the nuclear sites were down, they were sourcing very high cost power from other places. They pass that cost on to us, and then we pass it through to our customers. On the monthly basis, it's not as much like, oh, we crossed into new territory, so we're in a new rate category or anything like that. And then I think it's probably a more complicated conversation on our rates, because we just have so many rates, and commercial rates are different than residential rates.
Right.
But yeah, that buying power from expensive places, that's a TVA function, but it is one that they pass through to customers, absolutely. So we are going to break kind of the next section into two chunks. So the first chunk, we're going to talk about 2 utility projects that we have within our fiscal plan for next year. We want to let you know about these programs, as well as get some initial feedback. We won't spend too long here on how we communicate about those. And then we're going to shift into some much more kind of blue sky hypothetical examples for early discussion of customer programs. So let's shift over.
Yep, that's a good one. And Stephen, I would say, our day-to-day peak, we've got growth in our area, and we are growing, but nothing that makes us nervous. I would say one of the more tangible things that we are beginning to experience is when these weather extremes come, they're not really any more frequent, they're just more significant or severe. So
Are you attributing the spikiness to leftover resistant heat systems that are having to work?
Potentially, there's a lot of that in our community.
Are you able to root those out? I mean, can you identify basically on the grid where some of those pockets of higher spike activity is, and then
I don't think we're
can you
quite
target into
there yet.
Yeah.
I think that's on our radar
Yeah.
of figuring that out. I think where KUB's fortunate, take TVA out of the equation, the philosophy we took to build our system decades ago is we have lots of capacity. So our substations are built to carry about 50% of the load any day. So we've got that other 50% in reserve. And we did that, not knowing this was coming years ago, but to allow us to do maintenance on our system, take a substation out for an extended period of time to do what we're supposed to do, and that's upgrade it and refurbish it and make it work for another 50 years. And so that's had a secondary benefit of giving us a lot of capability.
gives you headroom, but I guess what I'm wondering
Yeah.
is can you begin to isolate certain parts of town where you may need to concentrate, say, programs to try to do in essence, fleet turnover?
Yeah, I think that's coming.
That's
Same thing with the EV adoption.
Yeah.
We've studied the EVs, and I think it's less than 10% adoption probably in our community. I don't remember the latest numbers, but it was single digits last time I looked. But, our study says, hey, when you get to about 30% adoption across the community, that's going to be impactful for your grid, and we're going to have to figure that out. So we've got that study. I think it'd be the same thing with the heating and other things. Same thing with solar adoption. As that continues to progress, it will have an impact on the grid, and we'll have to factor that in. But again, we're kind of focusing on this peaking thing now because it's real to us because of that. But that's a great question. So voltage optimization's a great one. This is one of the things TVA is advocating for across the valley as an outcome of Winter Storm Elliott. I won't get into the technical part of this, but what Aaron and I are talking about is ultimately that demand curve, that consumption curve from our customers goes like this, right? And so smoothing that curve is what we're talking about today. So voltage optimization, we are regulated by the Tennessee Valley Authority to keep our system voltage within a narrow band. And we do that. We've got technologies that keeps us in this band, but again, with the advent and the build out of this fiber system, we're now able to put sensors out at the tail end, the very far extents of our system, and track voltage real time. We also have the capability, we talked about our SCADA system there as one of our first systems. We're currently refurbishing it and replacing it with newer technology. That's to go live this fall. But we're able to control the voltage in a much more granular method now. And not to get into this, but power is the result of current and voltage. direct. It's PIE, right? And so if you can lower that voltage, you lower the necessary power. And so what we've done, we've got a pilot project out there now. We've done a couple of our feeders, and it's not quite automated yet. It's semi-automatic, but we wanted to study this a bit, and it's been very successful. And so you can see the red curve is what our peak would look like as a representation of without this voltage optimization. And the blue curve is with our voltage optimization. You can see how we lower that. And that end of the day, the surface area under both of those is the power, and much less power under that blue curve. So we feel really good about it. It helps us, again, with that wholesale billing potentially. It would help us with the peaking for TVA. If we'd have had this during Winter Storm Elliott, we would have turned it on. And once we fully deploy this, we're not going to put this everywhere on our system. It's mostly where we're heavy residential. But once we're built out, we're theorizing that we're going to get 1 to 3% of ability to manage that peak. So you think about those 5% blocks. That's a big chunk of that first block. And so we're pretty sure we're going to build this out. We've got it budgeted. You can kind of see the project, about 15 to 20 megawatts of reduction there in peak. When we deploy it, we think we're going to save about $2 million a year for all of us when we do that, and it's about a 3-year return on investment. We think we're going to build this out over the next maybe 5 to 6 years to get it built out. So again, fiber's enabling us that granular control, real-time control, so we can lower that voltage down to the lower end of that bandwidth that we're enabled to do.
So this is something you can literally turn on and off as opposed to something like reconductoring your distribution lines or something.
Yeah, and I won't say this is an easy button, but it's an easier button than making those giant capital investments to do things. And it's not something we'd run 24/7. We don't want to do that. We'll make those calls definitely during extreme weather, and more than likely to manage that monthly peak we're talking about.
And is there an expense to running it? Is that why you don't run it 24/7, or is
It's a threshold thing. It'd be like driving your car 140 miles an hour
So it
all the way to
stresses the
Miami.
system.
You got to be careful with.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to be careful with it. The other example of this, and I find this one very interesting, and y'all have likely heard a lot about battery storage all over the place, and it's now reaching a point to where grid-connected, utility-controlled batteries are a viable thing. So the technologies are still changing a bit, so we're watching that. The pricing's definitely coming down, sans the recent tariffs, I guess, but the pricing's coming down to where it's interesting to us. So we've got an initiative out there where we're looking at about 20 megawatts of storage initially on our system over a 4 or 5 year period. Again, managing that peak economically, we can save just under $2 million a year, and you've got about a 6-year payback. So that picture you see there is from a utility over in Middle Tennessee. You can see it's located next to a substation. That's how we think we're going to do it. That's the best, largest place to inject this energy into our system. So the way this thing will work is we'll charge these batteries overnight when the peaks are low and the energy's cheap, and we'll discharge it and coast on that battery when the peaks are high. So again, Winter Storm Elliott would have come. If we'd have had this, that would have been 20 megawatts of that 5% that we could have saved on, and we feel good about doing this in the near future and helping again modernize that grid and building this operational flexibility so we're not so subject to the whims of TVAs, is a unit running or not, and give us that buffer. I think our first battery set goes in next year.
Yeah,
next year.
there's a lag time when you order it. It takes a while to get here, but we would anticipate putting that order in pretty early in FY26, so.
Yeah, so we'll put in, I think there's going to be, I can't remember, 4 or 5 locations, Ardo? Four locations. So we'll do this at 4 substations basically over the next 4 to 5 years.
What's the duration of the battery?
It's a 2-hour.
We're still trying to decide, likely 2 hour, maybe 4 hour, depending on the pricing when we bid.
Have you guys talked to MLGW about what's going on over there with XAI?
We hope to learn more soon, but
Yeah, we've heard bits and pieces, and a lot going on over there.
But yeah, but I mean, it's incredible. I think they've deployed the largest number of, the XAI thing's deployed the largest number of megapacks in anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And they're learning a lot quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, these are things that we as a utility are doing. They're not customer programs, but because they are new, and because at least it's been, you know, battery, they'll be visible. You'll drive by a substation, be like, what is that? So we wanted to kind of give some space for today to kind of get your thoughts on what questions you have that we would want to anticipate from other customers as well. And then as we start to develop communications about this project, what is the information that you might want to know? And, you know, we were kind of laughing about this, like, do you even care? You know, it's on our side of the meter. You don't have to worry about it. You know, it'd be okay. Like, whatever, do your thing. But we just wanted to give some space to hear some perspective on this and what types of information and what types of communication you would advise that we be thinking about as we roll these out.
We care.
Okay.
I do have a question. Workforce. Since some of this is changing, I know that you could easily adapt some of your workers, but what type of jobs will be added when these rollouts happen?
Let's see, the smart healing grid is us as we are. It is changing some jobs. It's changing some behaviors for our system operators. So nothing new there. Voltage optimization, likely the same thing. That's our voltage operators. They're learning to plan and forecast. So we'll probably bring an engineer into our control room to do some of that system forecasting. When do you turn it on and off kind of behavior. So nothing terribly new there. And then batteries, it'll likely be our maintenance folks. We'll probably contract someone out to build the facility itself. It'll be our maintenance people that'll probably take some new skills, maybe some new hires there.
So, would it be fair to assume that some jobs would be eliminated because of the automation?
I think for these two particular programs, DVR and batteries, I don't know that that would have a workforce plus or minus
These are
at
kind
all.
of adders
Yeah.
to our system, I guess. I've talked to TVA about this. A lot of this stuff sounds really good, and it sounds like savings, and it is in certain perspectives, but so that's why we wanted to introduce the technologies. Those are really adders to our stuff we own, which requires people to, you know, maintain and operate and all of that. So I don't think any of the things we're talking about today would.
Of course, in the community,
Reduce.
you're looking at the progression of AI and everything being automated, and technology is so advanced now, you don't need the human person to be there. So of course, I'm concerned about it from a community perspective because there's so many people who do not have technical skills in our community when you're looking at low and moderate income families. And I mean, and then for families who are working, you know, I just want to make sure that the human condition is addressed in the equation.
Yeah.
When we progress, that we just don't leave people behind, because that leaves a social problem because of our new technologies.
Yeah, we onboarded, that's a great point. We onboarded a consultant a couple of years ago to start talking about defining grid modernization and what's that look like and what do we need to be working on. And I will say, I drove some of that, and I went into it kind of naively saying, well, we're just going to create our grid modernization roadmap, and we'll get our plan, and we'll execute that plan like we do everything else. And it didn't take long to understand, working with that consultant, that we're not ready for that roadmap yet.
And the sustainability piece, we were looking at the report of how much money was collected from consumers for just turning their electricity back on after it had been turned off, and the late fees were in the millions of dollars, and generally affected the poorest of your clients because they cannot afford it. And from our perspective, looking at what we're trying to do to keep their lights on, I just want to make sure that that is considered when you're making these decisions.
So when we did that consultancy, we came away with 8 domains of concern, and we're talking about some of them today, but one of those boxes was the human element. And mostly focused on our workforce, because that's what we were looking at, but I think ultimately it'll get there.
Consumers
And one of the other
especially, yeah.
boxes was partnering with the community as this begins to pan out, at whether it's sustainability or whatever it is making sure that we can't go this alone. And that's kind of what we're talking with you all today, is our customers may have to help us manage the grid a
Oh,
bit.
absolutely, especially the affordability for low and middle-class families.
Yeah,
Thank you.
fair enough. Good
In
question.
answer to your second question, I absolutely believe that y'all should share this information, because what I think is going to follow about the customer side dimension, it will, I think, motivate customers and also create a sense of common purpose if you have the utility basically leading on some of these technologies and demonstrating what they can do on their side of the meter, and then you're asking customers to do their part on their side of the meter. I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you, I'm like, where the hell have you been on batteries, right? Because some of us have been doing that for a little while, and, you know, the technology is there, and so it's great to hear you guys starting to get into that space. And I think if you're going to do things like time of use rates and some of these other things to manage that, y'all need to lead by example, but then you need to sort of create that common purpose that we're working on both sides of this meter to collectively do it. So I don't think you should act like customers, not all customers are going to be interested in it, but I think you're going to have a gradation of both on people's understanding and then also their ability to engage. And you want those early adopters to see that you guys are, you know, not just, you know, talking the talk, but you're also walking the walk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fair.
that's a great point.
I'm curious, I'm just trying to connect a couple of dots on the, so like on the battery, how many substations? There were,
4 in
Yeah.
this plan, yeah.
Okay, so then those would be established. I keep going back to the numbers. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think any savings is awesome, but 3.8 million a year comparable to the overall budget is pretty small. But also thinking about sort of the speed of which technology is happening, you know, what's the lifespan, I guess, of, you know, you do batteries or you do the voltage optimization. I'm thinking about the iteration, and then, you know, if it's a 5 to 6 year ROI, what are you looking at in 5 to 6 years? Does it start to become obsolete? And, you know, so I'm just looking at, you know,
Yeah.
the investment. There are other soft costs if you're talking about a new building or new off. I think I just heard that. Just thinking about all of those numbers and with
Yeah.
a pretty small savings comparatively.
Yeah.
For,
No, that's a
for
good point.
starters, I think you're right, and that's very astute, because in our industry, we're used to putting something in and it living for 50 years to 100 years, right? And so those smart switches we're looking at, we have reclosers like that are mechanical, and they've been on our system for many, many years, right? And you'd put one in and it just worked for 50 years. You never had to touch it or go see it. Well, these new units, they've got electronics, they've got controls, they get patched just like your computer does with new code, and that cycle of life that you're talking about is really changing in our world, and we're having to learn to pivot around that more rapid change of things for us. So we're not there yet. We're recognizing we're going to have to figure that out, but storage on our system is something that's never really existed before, and we're so happy to have that capability.
Sure.
We use it in our other systems. We're very accustomed to doing it, but we've just never had it on the electric side. And 10 years from now, who knows what that looks like.
How many substations do you have total?
We've got 60, 63, 64 substations.
Well, if you get up to the 60 million mark, that's a little different
Yeah.
than
Yeah,
3.8.
yeah,
Well,
You're
and I-
basically looking at 4 substations
Yeah.
and just under 4 million in savings,
Yeah.
so.
What you saw on that is that's our truly just like on paper, our, I think it's a 10-year long-range plan. So, yeah, I mean, the idea is
your
that,
point.
you know, going back to that balance of, you know, there's a case to be made, like, put as much as you can put on that system. But we're also then balancing it against, other capital demands and not wanting to,
I think that do not undervalue the ability of your customers to comprehend. In particular, your little video example from South Carolina did a really great job of breaking it into no matter what capacity you have to understand. Not turning on your oven and your dryer at the same time. I don't think you should underestimate that, and I think that does two things. One, it helps you with your peaks, and two, it helps our customers understand their own ability for cost savings. I'm not saying it shouldn't be logical to some people, but it's not if they've never had any education surrounding use. And I don't underestimate that, because I think there is value in our customer participation.
Yeah, when we hit that step 30, that TVA calls when this is going on, used to, we would just post and say, hey, conserve. And I agree with it, but what we're learning to do is say, hey, we need you to conserve, and you can conserve by doing X, Y, Z, making it simple, clear, easy to say, hey, don't turn on your washing machine between the hours of X and X. And I think that'll help a lot.
Don't leave all the lights on at one time.
Yeah.
There's different options.
And it's funny because it runs counter to.
Don't let Alexa turn them on and off at specific times. You turn them off and on at specific times.
Yeah, and so I think if we can be a little more directive and clear, I think you're
Sure,
right.
you're right, you spot on, because I learned something today. If people don't understand the language in its context, and that was simple, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll stop running my dryer. Or, running the washer and dryer at the same time, which I do.
Yeah,
Don't worry, we all do.
Yeah. Except for my wife. I went home during these times. I called her, and I go home. She's sitting in the dark with nothing on. She gets the grill. A little more
That's
pressure
commitment right there.
Yeah. She's got more motivation, I guess, than others. But I will say, the counter to that is we live in a world of convenience. So we're going to have to make sure the value's clear for folks to change their behaviors.
Well, and we're getting into the next section, so I'm gonna,
so-
if you don't mind, we're gonna pivot, because I think we want to be cognizant of time, but also I think this is where probably you'll be a little bit more interested in this next section. Yeah.
I like the words, optimize, modernize, sustain, retain. Those are great words, but I start thinking, who's going to pay for it? Where's the cost at for this? And if it ends up with the customer, because it just gets passed down. And marketing, PR efforts to let folks know why you're doing this and how you can help and how much it will save, because we're going to have to pay for it. And that's where sometimes people think $20 really doesn't make a difference on a bill. Well, for some people it does.
It really does.
So just making sure that all that loops and stays together and works together, because it's going to impact somebody down at the bottom that's got to pay for this, for everybody else to stand on it. So
Yep.
just throwing it out.
No, great point. It's a balance. So this next section is really starting to shift into the things that are more customer facing. So if DVR and batteries were kind of on our side of the fence, these are the things that are on your side of the fence. So we're going to start kind of in the very broad, and we'll tailor our way back to a little bit more specificity, so bear with me. We included the idea of a microgrid because it was something that we heard interest in when we came and talked with you about flexibility and some of the things that you wanted us to be thinking about in terms of how we rolled out flexibility, and resilience was one in these extreme events. So we included this idea of a microgrid. It's an idea that you're taking an area, it could be a larger area, it could be as simple as a community center or a library, and you are giving it both a source of energy generation, so that could be solar panels, it could be a generator, and you're also giving it something to store that power with, and such that when the lights go out, that entity, that area, can we call it island itself, and it can continue to operate pretty much without interruption, and that way it's providing that resilience benefit. Utilities are also using this, though, on a blue sky day for that peak management. So they're drawing from that battery, or they're pulling from that energy generation source. And this is why this goes into that question about solar, and how do you use solar. So the idea of a microgrid is both a resilience benefit, but it's also this idea of this daily or monthly ability to help bring down that peak cost. So we saw this, the area of Hot Springs, North Carolina. If you've been to Hot Springs, it's really out in the middle of nowhere, and Duke was looking at the need to add some energy infrastructure, traditional heavy wires and stuff to get, make sure power was reliable out there. They made the decision instead to put in a microgrid with solar and storage. And when Hurricane Helene came through, that microgrid popped into action, and much of Hot Springs was able to be served and provide critical services to the first responders who were there because they had that resilience asset. So exciting to see these types of things play a real role in real time, and that's kind of the first project example that we offered because of the idea of a community-based resilience asset and kind of the interest in that. Yes. Yes, jotting notes and ending questions. So we're going to ask for reflections on these, but yeah, you have the handout on that. The second example takes that idea of like a community scale asset and shrinks it down to a particular customer. So think about your home, your business. And it's the same kind of concept, however, and that's that you're going to, see an opportunity, for example, to say, hey, let me put a battery in my garage, or solar panels on my roof, or a generator behind my porch. And in the event of the outage, all of those systems are able to keep the home up and running. Those can be expensive, and so in certain cases, utilities are providing incentives, either at an upfront cost basis or on an ongoing basis, because again, the idea here is not just that that generator and that solar or that battery is available to the home and only the home in an outage, it's that it's connected to the grid and talking to the grid, and the utility is able to draw that power when it needs it most, and it's paying customers for that value. And so there's incentives that are flowing back to the customer to help offset the cost. So again, thinking about customer backup power as well as peak shaving opportunity, and we're seeing these types of programs emerge at peer utilities across the country. So we're interested in, yeah.
In the 80s, when we were installing the HVAC units in our home, it was attached to our mortgage, basically. Are you all considering financing, or are you just not even going to get with that?
Well, I think we're not even at that point because we're really, we're not yet in the process of even designing a specific program. We're really thinking about more at the very high level. So I think what I would, suss out from that point of feedback would be, okay, if you were to do a customer program like this, you should think about financing because some people won't be able to afford the upfront cost. So how do you support that? So again, it's not that this is a specific proposal that we're, refining. It's more about kind of here's something we're seeing in the industry and getting some early thoughts. But I think that point about the need for that upfront cost is a good one.
Please put in your note, I am adamantly opposed to any type of financing to be attached to the person's primary home, their residential, or as a second mortgage or anything like that. A lot of people did not realize that.
Yeah, you don't want to put your home at risk for something you can't afford. Okay, so that's kind of the second idea. So again, taking the idea of shrinking it down. Still pretty, investigatory at this kind of introductory blue sky, but this next one is a little bit more specific, and that is a smart thermostat program. So you heard the Santee Cooper video reference the idea of turn your thermostat down a few degrees. This is a program, not exactly as you see it on the screen, but we piloted a smart thermostat program several years ago with TVA. And so the continued dialogue with TVA around a smart thermostat program and some of the ways that we can see that type of model evolve is very much an active one. And so we're really interested in kind of the appetite of a group like the KUB to say, would you want the utility controlling your thermostat? That is, it's a big question for some people. So that's what we're really interested in. But the idea here is that, you have that smart thermostat on your wall. As a customer, you enroll optionally, this is just an option, in a utility-based program. That utility then provides an incentive. Maybe it's an upfront incentive, or maybe it's an ongoing participation incentive, or both. And during those extreme moments of, high temperature, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's really just at the extremes, but kind of this ongoing basis, the utility is saying, hey, we could reduce our peak demand if we tapped into all of those smart thermostats that have enrolled in this program, and they push the button. And when they push the button, your heat goes down or your air conditioning goes down. You use less energy. So we see these programs. They're very common. And again, we've piloted one at KUB, and so we're interested here to kind of see some of that reaction and reflection of, if this existed today, would you want to do it? Or I know, what is it, thermostats and marriage fights go hand in hand. So, would your household, would you be interested in something like this or not? So we're really interested in this because it is an active conversation. So that was my third one. We're going to flip to discussion. We can ask questions, but we'd love to just kind of jump in at the time we have left.
Just a quick question. This is something that happened recently at our house. We left, we opened the windows during the day in the spring because there's no need for air conditioning. It's a cool air in. We closed them, and then we forgot one, so the heat was on all night. Is there some device? Is there something in these programs that would prevent that sort of thing, or would register the fact that, wait a minute, that you're putting out too much heat for
Yeah,
a night like that?
I don't know that I've heard of that particular type of control as part of the program. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I think it's more that many of the programs that we've researched have tried to be very specific about what they're going to do and when they're going to do it, because I think there's that big brother unease that some people may have if your utility was just at any moment of the day toggling because, I don't think they should be running their heat. They don't mean to do that, So I the program itself, I think, would really be more tailored toward what's happening on the grid, and is that peak demand worth, reaching into that home to do. But
I do think it's a good point. There are so many variables with this. For example, where the thermostat is located in the home and windows. If it were a program more than just here's a smart thermostat, go, but a little bit of education for, I know this sounds silly, how to operate a thermostat. I mean, we use smart thermostats in all of our restaurants, and nobody knows how to handle them. They're all just glad someone else is on it, like me. And it's not even as simple as set it and forget it, because the changing seasons dictate you to constantly tweak it. Like it's not dummy proof. It requires human element. It requires education so that it can actually be used. So to do something used properly so that you get the benefit from doing it. And secondary to that, and part of this is tongue-in-cheek, have you considered targeted demographic outages for like college students, for example? Or, all jokes aside, people who haven't had hardship as it relates to power, speaking from a slightly younger demographic, when you grow up in a very comfortable environment, you're not regularly thinking about, we shouldn't put AC on in the summer. Like, that's just not in our vocabulary because it wasn't in our history. And so I don't even know where you begin with that kind of a campaign of education, but surely maybe with some hardship.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you carry that on beyond the awareness, maybe some reporting on the back end as well? Here's how you were impacted, or here's how well you did, or
Yeah,
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and on the previous one, talking about residential energy resources, I remember when fiber was coming out, there was a map where you can type in your address, do I qualify for fiber? Something as user-friendly as, do I qualify for this? And what do I qualify for? And it's just like a series of simple questions, what is your existing HVAC, what kind of power, do you have gas in your home? And just, do I qualify? And starting with like a litmus test. That's very easy for someone to follow.
great suggestion.
In your Michael bed, is that land that you would have to go out and purchase, procure to support that, or what's the infrastructure for that?
It would depend on the property.
Yeah, I think it would very much depend on kind of the scenario. I mean, I think we've seen this be deployed, for example, on a community center site that you could imagine it's just in the yard, I think for a thing like Hot Springs, like you saw on the slide, that's a much bigger amount of space.
Right.
So it would just depend. I think it would.
I guess the question of bringing it up is whatever your internal structure is, what's going to be the impact as you plan over here? What's the impact internally for them to support you, to get contracts out, to turn contracts around?
Yeah.
Operations, we don't think about that kind of stuff. We just go do it. and
We don't even know how we're gonna operate these things yet,
Just
but yeah,
support
that's a great point, yeah.
On the residential energy resources, would that be like ongoing rebates or incentives, or is the thought that would be like a one-time thing? Because for me, if my power goes out once, like every 3 years or whatever, I don't really care. If I have backup power right now.
What's your address?
No. If I lived, I lived in Texas for a while where we had hurricanes and power went out much more often, I would be more interested in that. So if you say I have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 to not be without power once every 3 years, I'd probably be like, no. Unless there's. No. I have a lot more water breaks than I do. If it was water, I might be for it, but
Okay.
power, and I'm not giving you my address, but power. So I was just curious about, right, the ROI for the customer, right? Because that has to be there, from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think making it a win-win-win would be when it would come in, if the customer is experiencing reliability issues, it's a fit there. KUB potentially subsidizing that because we could use it for managing these peaks and get economic win-win. So I'm not sure these fit everywhere. I think we're gonna have to be careful to make sure we place them, to your point, in the appropriate place.
Yeah, because I could see the utility benefiting off of that more than the consumer, depending on how reliable the grid is in that area.
Yeah, agreed.
So I'm going to zero in on the number 2 here. I am participating, I don't even know if it's still a pilot program, in KUB's time of use program. I will give you feedback. I have heard nothing from you guys about, I get the bill, I get the savings, I know what I'm doing, but I haven't heard anything back about how this program is being distributed through the community. Are there other people doing it? What are you seeing as a utility in the benefits that come out of that? And so where, to me, this residential energy resources really sings for both the customer and for the utility is when you're incentivizing. So I've got batteries and I've got solar in my home. I'm able to make the house disappear on the grid during peak times. You guys are rewarding me through a discount rate on the power. There's obviously benefits to the whole system when my load goes away. And so it would seem like that you would want to couple a time of use rate with customer, and I would strongly encourage you not to incentivize generators, because that is actually working in the wrong direction for environmental sustainability, because those things are not that clean and certainly not that efficient as a general rule. But I think if you're incentivizing batteries and you're incentivizing solar generation or something like that, you're getting you're sort of getting the sort of full triple play of the benefits that come out. And so it would seem like to me that you would want to tie something like this to time of use rates, and then it seems like to me, I was expecting y'all to be pitching time of use rates in this thing, and you're not even mentioning them. And yet, to me, that is the ultimate in consumer education that ultimately is a win-win both for the utility and the customer because they're getting a discount. I would also have expected that you guys would be even incentivizing more off-peak charging for people with electric vehicles, so that there's, you're basically starting to send those market signals more directly, so that as the vehicle penetration goes up, you're beginning to educate a class of customers that, hey, because I know like Georgia Power and some others, they give even a super discount rate if you're charging, between 12 at night and 4 in the morning, stuff like that, whereas you guys are just giving a generic rate. You've got the smart meters to do it. It seems like you could come up with those things. So it seems like to me there's a whole series of things in example 2 And then I would ask, have you done the math on if you deployed smart thermostats and you got a certain level of participation, but maybe you went after a smaller set of customers and you did a stronger program that made them disappear, you might actually get the total system, offloading of the peak times with a fewer set of customers, but customers who are incentivized or capable to do it, as opposed to trying to do a system-wide program. I'm not against you doing a system-wide. I think smart turf are there. But if your goal is, hey, we need this amount reduced, you might be able to accomplish it by hyper-incentivizing a certain set of customers to make themselves disappear, as opposed to rolling the dice of whether people are going to comply with the smart thermostat.
Yeah, Stephen, you're spot on. We are doing those things. We try to limit what we're mentioning here today.
Yeah.
Time of use
Keep it
is kind of
manageable.
undergoing. I think we hear you. Maybe some feedback on that would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd
So-
love to hear how it goes. I mean, and you've got, most of the people that are probably signing up for that program would love to get a little feedback and say, hey, how's it going? What's going
Here's where we're
on?
heading.
Where are you ending up?
Yeah, and there's many more programs we're not mentioning today, like a water heater conversion
Yeah.
or heat pump conversion.
Sure.
And so we were just trying to get a feel for, okay, if there is something at the home and it might look like this.
Yeah.
So to your point,
But I think I think this is to me, this is the rich, I love microgrids, but that's just going to affect a very small group of
That's
people.
strategic.
Yeah, and stuff like that. And
However, I would be remiss if I did not raise my hand and say, because Aaron and I have had lots of conversations about this, that I believe that the city has a significant interest in particular in our more challenged and marginalized communities to really look at a partnership or opportunity for some microgrid when we already have some existing infrastructure without starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
so can you explain that a little bit more? I'm not sure I follow.
Well, and what I may ask is, maybe we can have an offline conversation after the meeting, because I know we're close to time, and I want to kind of, yeah.
Overall, go back and ask yourself, do you have a relationship with the local community? Do you have it? Be honest with yourself, because that'll help roll out a lot of things if you have that relationship with the community. And there may be some new ways to look at it. As I have somebody say to me a couple of days ago, if you're not rethinking, you're not thinking. So do you really have a relationship with the community? How do you make that better to be able to roll out things like this, to incentivize people to help? So that's just an overall question.
And I do think, Stephen, the follow-on is that managed charging for the EVs is something we're probably gonna, but I think that's a no-brainer at some point.
Yeah.
Have more comments, you can email them to Taylor. And even if you wanted to, there's plenty of space on these individual sheets to jot down some comments or questions or things you'd like to see a follow-up on, and just hand them out or give them back to us.
I would also say, if you're willing, I would love to know just like the head count on like, would you sign up for a smart thermostat program? Because really, I mean, we really are like, we're like, are folks gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna sign up for that, let you control my thermostat, or, are people more interested? So again, I mean, I think this really is a timely discussion of what is the appetite from customers, be they residential or commercial.
So it does it on its own.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's like, in the morning it's like 16
Yeah.
degrees, and in the afternoon it's like 70, whatever.
Yeah.
As I
So-
get older, that gets a bit more challenging, but.
I think that's the kind of user feedback that's really helpful to know, and just kind of this, how does that world look in which, there's a little bit more of that, and like, okay, utility's gonna push a button and you're gonna get a text and that thermostat's gonna do its thing, and we're very curious. So this again has been really relevant and timely for us as we
Appreciate your
evaluate
dialogue
this.
as well,
Yeah.
And I want to thank Aaron and John, because grid modernization is incredibly technical, and I think you did a great job of breaking down for everyone to understand it.
Okay, thank you.
You have received an invitation for the tour, and if you're interested, and this is for any member, please reply. They need to know your availability by tomorrow afternoon. It's 3 hours. It's an overview of KUB's operations, a walking tour of the Whitaker Water Treatment Plant and the Kauai Wastewater Treatment Plant, and one of our electric substations. So if you are interested, please reply to that email by tomorrow. And if you don't have your email, just email them and tell them you want to be on the tour. Email Taylor. Our next meeting is June the 5th at 3 p.m., topic to be announced. And we really appreciate y'all coming, and I'm sure that Aaron and John would be willing to take any additional comments now after the fact and answer any other questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll stick around and chat. I almost was like, wait, raise your hand if you're